Joining us also is Mr. Jack van der Merwe from the GMA, the Gautrain Management Agency. And I think many of us, hopefully at some point it will be all of us, if you come to this gathering, that you would have come via the rails. And because I think it's added an interesting dimension to our lives in what you've created over the past few years. I found the report on the French recently interesting. They have upgraded their rail system, and you may know much more of the details, and we may have it all wrong, but I understand they built all the new coaches for the new rail system, just to realize that the tracks were either too wide or too narrow, but the carriages have already been built. So I want to say thank you for not having built the wrong width or the wrong carriages. But with those few words, I want to say, Mr. van der Merwe, welcome here in sharing with us today a perspective from your experience in working with this beautiful project, which I think is really a flagship project for the country at large. Welcome here today.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I was asked to talk about leadership, which is quite a difficult thing, but let me just tell you something about myself. I received the bursary from government to study engineering. So they gave me 400 rand for my first year, 400 rand for my second year, 600 rand for my third year, and 600 rand for my fourth year. So the government invested 2,000 rand in me. I started working for government on the 26th of June 1971. So I've been working 43 years to pay back the 2 rand. So it's actually quite a...
And they're not intending to release you soon.
The Premier says I must work until I'm 77. So I still have about 12 or 13 years to go. And all right. What I was thinking of talking about is first, if you talk to academics, you have to first have a disclaimer. And then I'm going to talk about what are the fundamentals of leadership. Talk about the Gautrain project as a case study. And then just quickly about what the vision is for transport in the future. Leadership is not an exact science. You can study it, but in the end it's more a gut feeling. You can know the theory, but the building blocks have to be put together to your specific need. And if you copy what I've done, there's no guarantee that it will be successful for a second time. I have a book where I write in all my notes, and I write from the back things that I want to do differently if I have to do it again. All of my books are full from the back, so it is quite an issue. All right, what are the fundamentals of leadership, the way I see it? The first thing is that leadership, everybody plans, every person in the world plans. The only different is the distance of your planning horizon. So a guy that digs a trench, his planning is maybe what's for lunch, and maybe the worst, what is he going to do over the weekend. The leader must plan much further in the future. And because we live in a complex world, that planning horizon is very difficult to model it. Second one is that one manages people. And I think the world is divided into two types of people. Fundamentally, there's people with open minds and there's people with closed minds. People with open minds are willing to learn, they're willing to see what's happening in the world, and you can have an open mind if you're 2 years old or if you're 90 years old. So that's actually when you're young. If you have a closed mind, you have decided, man, I finished my degree, I've put it on my wall, that's it, I'm finished. I'm not going to read anymore, I'm not going to learn anything. I'm happy to do what I've been doing all the time, so I just keep on repeating it. And that person is old, so you can get an old person at the age of 20. And one must be very clear who you're trying to lead, because otherwise, you can do a lot of things to people, but you can't get enthusiasm in a person. If a person isn't open to learn, it's very difficult. All right, managing resources, traditionally, I'm a civil engineer, you manage people, plant, materials, and fuel. And those are the hard issues, and those are the tangible issues. But now, in the new world, you have to manage information, you have to manage time, you have to manage public perception and buying. And I mean, the case study is Nazir Ali with the toll roads. It's a magic project. I've been told by Minister Shabanga that I'm the native who caused the trouble because I wrote the memo way back in 1995. But when I wrote the memo, it was a good concept. What Nazir did is that He didn't communicate it. He didn't take the people with him. So you have to manage perception, and that you have to manage the environmental impact, and you have to nowadays manage the core business, because everything, in the old days there was always staff function and core function, and the staff functions were actually the second class people working for you. Now the staff function becomes a core for somebody else. It's a shared service center, and they do the staff function as a core, and you buy it in. So when you manage, you have to manage the core that you're busy with, and then actually manage the input of the cores of the other. The different management styles, I'm old enough to know. In the olden days, it was command and control. And I worked for let me first tell you, while I was in my second year, I got a letter from the Public Service Administration with a nice book saying, these are the departments that employ civil engineers, and I can make a choice where I'd like to work when I'm finished with my studies. And on the off chance, I have to have a second chance if I couldn't be placed on it. So I decided water affairs is my first choice. Public works, thank God, was my second choice. And 6 months later, I got a letter saying, congratulations, you now working in the T-Bay Roads Department. So that was a career-changing move for me. But in the end, so I then ended up building roads. And we had, in the old Transvaal, we had 57,000 kilometers of roads. We had 22 construction units. We had 47 bridge building units. We had 37 maintenance units. We were producing. We had the biggest caterpillar fleet in the world. We had 2,000 pieces of plant, and we were churning out 400 kilometers of tarred road every year. So that was command and control. The boss just had to keep this engine going. Everything was standardized, worked on a standard plan, 50-meter span bridges, and all you had to do was production. So it had a very hierarchical structure, and I think innovation per se was not highly regarded. You just had to get down and do it. Nowadays, leadership is a leading a knowledge-based organization where the structure is much flatter, where innovation is really valued, and very importantly, where the people that work for you know more about their subject than what you know. So you must know, I'm sitting in a meeting and I have environmentalists, I have social sciences, I have financial guys, and they all know more than me. Some days I feel like a conductor in an orchestra, and I don't know if this guy gets a heart attack. They'll only lunch when they break for tea, discover this conductor is gone, because you are just conducting it, you are just actually moving it. Right? Then you have to manage within the broader context of the country. You can't manage in a vacuum. In South Africa, we have two challenges, for the next 20 years. Fighting poverty, fighting unemployment. If we can't contribute to that, we can go on. Because that has to be, everything must be fitting into that. Now, how do we do it? We have to look at employment. Employment of the youth. We have 27% unemployed in our country, 60% of that are below 35 years. That's why we have violent service level protests. We have unemployed youth, people that are young, that are easily excitable, and if you don't keep them busy, they're going to be busy with the wrong things. So you have to do it. You have to fight the perception of corruption. The corruption itself, but the perception. You know that for every crooked thing that happens, the people will believe 10 things that didn't happen, but that is the story that you told about the rolling stock. In France, they decided to build new rolling stock. And in the plan, they allowed for changing the platform gap. You know, when you get to London, they say mind the gap. They allowed a certain amount of money for it. But there was again the opposition, the DA in France, that got hold of this, and they've now decided to make it a crisis. Do you know it's going to cost so many millions of rands to fix that? It was planned and it was designed. What they did is that they designed for any platform that had been built 30 years and younger, and these are platform stations that were built much earlier in their life, and they had to fix it. But again, the perception, it's the perception of inefficiencies, the perception of corruption. You know, in our country, we have the perception of corruption, and that has to be. The third thing that we have to do is to work more efficiently. We have to do more with less. Our country is, our labour cost is through the roof. We are producing, and if one looks at America, America is the market leader only for one reason. They reinvent themselves every few years. They learn to do more with less. And if we can't do it as a country, we can't compete on that. So leadership has to be done within that. Then, the famous thing about management in government and management in the private sector. I went to Harvard, and next to Harvard is the Kennedy School of Government. And they came across and they tried to convince us that managing government is the same as managing the private sector. But fundamentally, the private sector takes R1 and tries to turn the maximum profit out of it. Government takes R1 and tries to get the maximum service out of it. Now, from that day onwards, we aren't the same. The private sector, what is nice about the private sector is that they have an outside person, the auditors coming in, doing auditing their books and then determining return on investment, all of those things. So it's a standardized test of what you're doing. The private sector looks at the market segment. If you want to go to a fancy hospital, when you have a heart attack, you have to put 2 gold credit cards on your chest when they bring you in. Otherwise, they say, where's the credit card? Take him to Job and Jen. So you can look at your market segment. You have auditors that come and test it, so your success is measured much easier. What they've done when I was in Harvard, you will remember they always talk about the triple bottom line. Firstly, it would say, let's make money. Then they said, but you can't make money to the disadvantage of your workers, so look at the people. And they said you couldn't make money to the disadvantage of your community, so actually look at the environment. So that was the triple bottom line. When I got there, the Enron scandal had happened, so they said, but there's a fourth line now, and that's ethics. You can't make money if you're crooked, and that created quite a big stir in Harvard. The fifth one now is this long-term sustainability. You can't make money if you're using resources which are not renewable. So again, leadership within the private sector, it has to look at it. You know, we have King 1, King 2, King 3, which is really the world leader on governance. And we come down to this integrated reporting. And if you want to see a really good report, ESCOM has got an integrated report that they're bringing out now, which is actually showing these 5 lines that should be done. In the government sector, let me tell you, to do management in government well is 10 times more difficult than the private sector. If you don't want to work, government's a nice place. You know, government has got very broad passages. It's because the people that come late don't crash with the people that leave early. But if you want to do a good job, government is complex and it's really, because remember, who's the customer for government? Everyone. Everyone who lives in the country, everybody who's climbed over the fence and lives in the country. The service you have to do is, how do you measure success in service? Because, I mean, if we're in a roads department and we haven't built a road in Soweto, you go to the community in Soweto and say, what do you think of the roads department? They say, what? Who are they? We've never seen them, they're rubbish. So there's not a way of measuring the success of your so measuring success within government is a bit of a government again works on a yearly cash basis, so you aren't sure that whatever you start today will be funded properly in the next. And remember, there is always a greater gap between what you need and what you have. Jama Muleketi, when he was MEC for Finance, said government is deciding on priorities. It's deciding not between a good project and a bad project. It's deciding between 20 projects that are good and you can only fund 5. So one of the things that happened in Gautrain, I had massive criticism around the Gautrain. But it was not so much about the project itself. It was what could you do with the money somewhere else. So it's always a question of, I know in America, apparently if they use their full budget, they still will not be able to do their education plan as being approved. So there's always less money there. Global village, we live in a global village, and that just means information comes quicker. Your competitive advantage lasts much shorter. If you do something, you bring out the iPad, which is great, within 6 months, in China they'll make it faster, cheaper, quicker, better. So you have to, your competitive advantage is not something that you can rest on, it's something that you have to keep on going. News, it's real-time news in the war. That's why wars are just about impossible to fight. Because in the olden days, people went to the front, they came back, they told about victories and about people injured. Now you see them shooting somebody, and you see the blood and the guts, so it becomes a problem. Now you have data. You have an incredible amount of data that's available. But the trick is to convert the data into information. And that's really the difference between leadership and not. I always tell the story about the professor and the frog. The professor decided to do an experiment with the frog. So he took this big bullfrog, put it on the table, and he shouted, "Jump!" And the frog jumped. So he amputated the one leg, waited for the frog to get better, put the frog on the table, and he said, "Jump!" And the frog jumped. And then he amputated the other leg, and he put the frog on the table, and he said, "Jump!" And the frog didn't jump. So he wrote his conclusion. He says, "Do you know if you cut both legs off a frog, it goes deaf?" And I'm telling you, the more I work, especially with politicians, the facts are there, but the interpretation of the facts is the issue. So I have a contractor. I was in charge of the low-felt construction, so I built a lot of everything that any car road in the low-felt, I built it. I had a contractor who used to drink quite a lot, so he's driving home, and he's canned, but he goes home every weekend so his wife can dry him out. And he's driving slow, and there's a police car behind him, and he thinks, man, they're chasing somebody else, and he says, "Go past." And the police car keeps on the siren, so he stops and he says, "Police car, I'm driving slow." He says, "Yeah, it's fine, but you're driving on the wrong way side of the freeway." So this man is riding in his car, and he's riding on the wrong side of the freeway, and the cars are coming from the front, and it's chaos. So on the radio they say, "It's very dangerous, because look out, there's a man driving on the wrong side of the freeway." The guy says to his wife, "What? Every car here is driving on the wrong side of the freeway." So it's again how you interpret. Then, if one looks at global village, the question of information is that if you do something right, the way you manage social media, I mean, I have a whole section in the Gautrain that listens and monitors the social media. If a social media comes up and says, "You know, the Gautrain, I've been stuck in the train, I'm stuck there for," and then the messages become negative. And the guy from the social media just puts in something, "Do you know the Gautrain is only 20 minutes between stations," stuff like that. Then you put in the positive spin. So you have to manage information on a real-time basis. Turnkey solutions. In the olden days, we used to build projects. My life was in two parts. From 71 until 94, I was a civil engineer, and we built engineering stuff. And what is interesting is that we built projects, we evaluated it and gave each other prizes for the best project and the most innovative project. But it was a closed circle within engineers. Now, people don't want to have engineers doing it and somebody else doing the buildings. They want to approve the concept and then get the president to turn the key at the end. So it's a turnkey project where you have to give a total solution, which means your team all of a sudden becomes multidisciplined, and there's a lot of issues around that. And then the question is, who should lead that team? In the world, we find KPMG, Deloitte, those guys, they've cornered the market. So what do? They walk in and they just buy the project, and they project manage it. They don't have any skills themselves. They buy in all the professional skills, and they run them as subcontractors. So if we as engineers want to run a project, you have to be able to run it and not become a subcontractor whose cost must be managed. So it's very important. Then the last thing about just the fundamentals of leadership is predicting the future. We're living in a complex world. If it's complex now, to try and predict what's happening in the future is even more complex. It's so complex that the way is now to look at scenario planning, and if one looks at what Clem Santa is doing, he's now developed red flags and green flags. And these are actually key things that have to happen, so you have to keep the the green flags open or up, and the red flags are key things that if they happen, you're in trouble. And you have to actually either manage it. If you can't manage it, you have to adjust where you're going to. So this is really on the long-term vision, it becomes a major problem. Now, if one looks at Gautrain, I started working on Gautrain in June of 1997. I went to Germany with Tokyo Sequale, where we went to see the Chancellor of Bavaria, Herr Schmidt, and he then, Tokyo got up and he said to the guy, we had to buy a train tank from Merwe. You had to buy a train. So I said, thank you very much for telling me, but now I also know. And I got spoken German to me because Siemens is the head office is in so we did a pre-feasibility study in Gautrain. Then we ran a project. We eventually built on 65 sites simultaneously. We spent 3 million rand an hour. So every night I went home, we'd spend between 30 and 50 million rand for 54 months. I didn't go to jail once, which is quite a thing. So how did we run this? First thing around the Gautrain is that these mega projects take an average of 14 years from inception until the president cuts the ribbon. 14 years. And in that 14 years, there are 4 things that have to be there simultaneously. The first one is there has to be political will and commitment. If there is not a political champion, you're dead. You can, as a technocrat, try and run, but you can't. Now, it is quite interesting that in our case, it was called the Shalowa Express. He changed direction, but it was actually the ANC that supported it. So when he left, the next thing. And I've now worked for 6 premiers. I waited for my 10th new MEC. Unfortunately, I got the same one back, so I've only had 9 MECs. And that is, there's been a continuous support for that. The second thing is that it has to be a viable project. It has to be technically, financially, and legally viable. And it doesn't have to be, it could be a pipe dream of the premier or a pipe dream of the president. It gets scrutinized by the outside world. So if you think you're going to sell a pipe dream to the French or the Canadians or the Americans, you're dead. So it has to be technically, legally, financially viable. Thirdly, you have to show your money. The government must show it's part of the money. And we have, fortunately, in our country, the medium-term expenditure framework, so you can show 3 years of budget. And the private sector must show an appetite. When we advertised the Gautrain, there were 140 airport city links on the drawing board in the world. There are maybe 12 consortiums big enough to build it. So those 12 consortiums have to decide, will we spend time and money, lots of time, lots of resources, and will this project ever get to fruition? And that's the fourth one, is you need to get buy-in from the people. You have to be able to sell the advantages. Now, if one looks at these projects that have gone wrong, one of those 4 legs have fallen away, and they have to be done. Funding, timelines, and it's important to see in terms of leadership. When the new government started in '94, the Department of Trade and Industry said, how do we develop South Africa? And they identified 85 spatial development initiatives, which were the corridors or nodes. We, in the province, we did an economic analysis and said, why are we the market leaders in Southern Africa? And we came to the conclusion, mining, banking, and actually value add in our manufacturing side. We then came to a conclusion with all the cross-subsidization gone, mining is going down as a percentage of the GDP. The heavy industry, if you take something, put it on a train, get it to Durban, then put it on a ship, you can't compete on that. So we said we have to change Gauteng to become a smart province and really add intellectual property to products and not weight. We thought it was a great plan, but we didn't have money. We waited for DTI to give money, and then we had a cabinet resolution to say they will only fund the DTI projects in the poorer provinces. Then a funny thing happened, and that's where opportunity can only benefit you if you have the plans. So we had the plans available, and then the funny thing happened. We had the first census post the new government, the guy with the yellow suit got up and said, man, we have 45 million people, as we thought, but Gauteng has got 2 million more people. And the FFC formula, the Financial and Fiscal Commission formula, actually allocates money to provinces as a result of their population. So we ended up by getting about 2 billion rand a year extra. Then a very interesting happened. Salowa was appointed as Premier in April 1999. There was Lekgotla where the cabinet took a decision. All of a sudden, we had 10 MECs, new MECs, that sat there and they had this block of money available. They could take two choices. They could either just plow the money back into the system and use it up for housing or whatever. Or they could say, let's invest in a long-term projects that will not show return in their term. It will only show return in 30 or 40 years. So this is really a leap of faith for a politician, and I know them well. For them to have taken that decision is really magic, and one must give them credit. So they said, how do we marry the DTI projects, our Gauteng development strategy? They combined 14 of them into 10 projects, and they called it Blue IQ. Blue IQ was a project to how do you stimulate the economy of Gauteng to grow. Now, what happened then is that if you run a mega project, although it's a train project and it's a transport project, the KPIs are different. We have 3 sets of KPIs in the project. The one KPI is to create jobs, bring in foreign direct investment, and stimulate the economy. The other KPI is around land use. We have to change land use patterns. We are spatially distorted because of our apartheid policies. How do we get a more densified area? How do we make public transport more viable? That's another KPI set. And then the last KPI set is how do you make public transport a mode of choice and not a mode of force? In our country, public transport is used by people because they have no other option. Metro rail, we have 95% of the ridership of Metro rail are black males. Not even black ladies want to drive on it because it's just not safe enough. So, and everybody's just saying, if I have, it's now around about 6,500, 7,000 rand per household per month if I car, I clog up big school. So these are the KPIs that we had to. So we started off, we had the vision what we were to do, we got the opportunity, we got the money. It was announced in January 2000, and it was, let's go. So I was appointed as a project leader for the Gautrain. I was then Director General for Transport, so I was running 2 jobs. And we had to decide on what the contract form is, either a normal bill of quantities or PPP. That project we went for the PPP, we registered with National Treasury, and we had to appoint transaction advisors. So I appointed financial, legal, and technical consultants, but my financial consultant was Kagiso Financial Services. My legal consultant was Ledwaba Mazwa. My technical consultants were Utele, Lebone, and now, if I want to go to the international market, and I open the document, remember, this is 140 possibilities, of which mine is one. They're just going to say, I don't know these people, I don't trust them, I'm not sure it's going to work. So I was forced to appoint overseas consultants. So I appointed Sir Alexander Gibb, who has done half the railways in the world. I appointed Rothschilds as the financial advisor overseas, and I appointed Masons, which are now called Pinson Masons. It's the biggest lawyer firm in the world doing PPPs. But then I was paying him in pounds. So the guy from Rothschilds, I think he's 14th to the throne, and then I paid him as if he was king of England. It cost me 2 million rand a month. So I had a team of 6, and when he gets into the plane at Heathrow, he starts charging me £650 per hour. So while he's sleeping and drinking his cocktail on the plane, I'm paying 6,000, 7,000, 8,000 rand an hour. So I decided I'll go to London. So every 6 weeks I used to get on the plane, a Saturday, fly to London, stay in the Royal Horse Guards on embankment, then have the meetings in London. And remember, one thing about this project, I could not phone a friend. Nobody had done it in South Africa. I walked into the meetings in London, and they'd worked for 6 weeks, done all the easy things, and they said, right, here's a hitch, what are you going to do for the Merwe? And I would sit there and think, hey, man. I was trying to work out I think I was paid at that stage, I think £14 an hour. If I worked my salary backwards. I was paying these guys 400, 500, and 600 pounds an hour. But in any case, so it was quite an experience going there. We then came back, and then we started with the funding. In Gauteng, we have a rule in the provinces, 85% of our allocation must be spent on social services, health, education. The other 15% is then could then be spent on the other 9 departments, of which transport as well. So National Treasury, they were of the opinion I shouldn't do the project, or the province should do the project, and they tried their best to stop it. Man, one day when I write my life story, I'll tell you about the fights that I had there, but eventually they forced me to do a financial model for the whole province, and then to say that the 85% is just indicative. We have to model what the cost would be to education, health, and welfare. So in the end it worked out they needed 87%, and we couldn't do it. And then in November of 2005, Trevor Manuel announced in his mini-budget speech that the National will pay half of the project, and that the contingent liability of the project would be 20 billion rand. Now, when we started off, maybe can I tell you this story? Java Malaketi, when we said we're going to build a train, he said, what will it cost? I said, Java, I still have to design it. He said, what will it cost? I just need to know. I said, Java, please, this is just the estimate. I think it will cost 7 billion. So Java the next day went on the TV and said, we're going to build a train, it cost 7 billion. Then we started negotiating with the PVP unit at National Treasury, and it went up. The cost went up. We had a problem around that. What is interesting, every year before the budget speech, I would go to Treasury and we'd sit with the budget office and then see how we could change the Financial Act to accommodate the train. So we had, I had 2 young girls, and they were maybe 28, worked for KPMG, and they had to write the financial paper. I read this thing. When I read it the second time, I discovered it was in English, because I didn't understand anything. But I went to Trevor Manuel and we sat in the office, and these 2 girls got up. And they have 2 American consultants who've been running the budget office. And these 2 ladies ran rings around this guy, and I just thought, thank God, they were doing it, not me. But in any case, so Trevor Manuel, so they knew about this cost, and we took a decision. And in my book, when I wrote on the back, I said maybe we should make known this amount before it becomes an issue. So Trevor Manuel announced 20 billion rand. So the newspaper said 7 billion promised, now it's 20 billion. We were in the newspaper 1,800 times. 1,800 times in the next 6 weeks. Over the radio, I got shouted at and insulted. And so I got a call from Jeremy Cronin to say I must appear before the standing committee in Parliament. So I phoned the Premier and I said, Shalowa, I've been told to go. He says he's not allowed to tell you to go to Parliament, work for me, tell him he must ask me. So I think, well, I'm out of it. So I phoned Jeremy Cronin and I said, Jeremy, I'm sorry, you have to talk to the Premier. So he says, fine. So he sends him a letter the next day. The Premier says, I've got the letter, you must go. So I went, and when you go to the standing committee, you have to make copies. So I made 20 copies, and that night, middle of the night, they phoned me and they said, are you coming tomorrow? I said, yes. Down to Cape Town. They said, do you have copies? I said, yes, 20. They said, no, I need 140. So I said, why 140? He says, the newspapers and everything's there. So I had to get somebody in Cape Town to get me at the airport, open up the printing work, and get me. So I carried this case into the standing committee, and there was a battery of cameras, and Jeremy Cronin got stuck in it. Yes, and he had, when you do a project, you have money to get the best experts, but when you want to be criticized, there's always cleverer people on the other side who are experts. People that, if you own a car, you've got a master's degree in transport. If your wife owns a car, you've got a doctorate. So I had these experts there, and we sat the whole morning. And 2 o'clock, they ring the bell so that they have to go back into Parliament. So I packed my stuff up, and he said, where are you going? I said, I'm going home. He said, no, you have to be here tomorrow. I said, I don't have pajamas. I just thought I'd be here today. He said, don't make your problem mine. So I had to go and buy pajamas and look for a place to sleep. So the next day I'm back, and then the experts are there, all of the guys. saying, can't be done. And 2 o'clock they rang the bell again. And I started packing in, and Jeremy came and said, where are you going? I said, I don't care what you say. I'm going home. I've had enough. We've gone around it. So we got beaten around on the money side. But then we started the project. We started request for qualification. We wanted to get rid of the rats and the mice and get the consortiums to actually force the marriage between rolling stock manufacturers, construction, banking operators. So that was done. We developed the request for proposal. We went out to tender. We got back 18.5 cubic meters of documents. So it took a 10-ton truck half a day to deliver one tender, 2 5-ton trucks to the rest of the day to deliver. So we sat in a room 3 times this size to the roof with documents. It took us a year to work through them. We came to the conclusion it's too expensive. We went back to Treasury. We said, can we renegotiate? We renegotiated it. We went out with a best and final offer. We got back 87 crates, which is a little bit easier to handle. It was still not what we thought we wanted. We went out on the final best and final offer, so we went out the third time. We got back a proposal. We went to Treasury, we got TA3, and we started the negotiations. Now we negotiated for 14 months. Negotiated in 3 silos: technical, financial, legal, and then socio-economic development. So we negotiated in 4 silos. We started the morning at 8 o'clock, negotiated up to 1 o'clock in the silos. Then we classified level 1, level 2, level 3. Level 1 would be spelling mistake, level 2 would be something that you could handle, level 3 would be a deal breaker. So from 2 to 5 in the afternoon, we individually looked at those level 3 issues, had supper, and then we'd go back and negotiate, and we wouldn't go home until the level 3 would be sorted out. We did it for 14 months through Christmas, New Year, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. I used to get into my car at 11 o'clock and then drive in the middle of the road in Joburg, because Joburg is quite a hairy place to be in the middle of the night. Go back to Pretoria, and then stay come back. We negotiated 100,000 pages of contract documents. So we have a concession agreement which is 100,000 pages, and we thought, man, now we've covered all the bases. Now I've discovered we've given attorneys 100,000 places to find loopholes to charges. Bombella is a consortium of the biggest construction company in the world, Greek, based in Paris. The biggest rolling stock manufacturer is called Gautrain, based in Canada. RATP, the operator of the Paris Underground, Marion Roberts, and SPG, which is a consortium of 20 black companies. These guys had the best of the best there. What I didn't understand, they used to come and negotiate for 2 weeks. And then they'd say, they're going home to see their family. They weren't, they were just bringing in a fresh negotiator. And he would then negotiate for the next 2 weeks. I was there on my own. I was the best and the worst negotiator. I was the only one from government side. Maybe if I can talk about getting authorization. If you want to kill a project, I'm now, for my sins, in charge of the Aerotropolis and the Gautrain. And getting something approved is a 3-month process. You put it into the local authority and it goes through. What they did in the case of the Gautrain, they created a cabinet cluster of 4 ministers, 4 NDCs. And I could call a meeting in 72 hours. I think it's the first time in the history of the world that it's happened, and I'm not sure it'll ever happen again. But I could phone Java Mleketi and say, I've got a crisis, I need to meet in 72 hours. And that was the only reason for that is then I had to fly in people from Canada or France or come to me. So the decision making was much faster. What we didn't know in that 14 months, there's a claims artist company in the world called Rebel, and they came to negotiate as part of the consortium. They actually built in a claim or claims into the documents. So the documents that we signed in the end had the claim. I appointed one guy to look at the commercial aspects. He walked into my office after about 9 months and he said, man, we have a problem. These guys are putting in the pegs for the claim. We were getting 140 letters per week, and all of them had a claim thing. So I said to him, do you have enough capacity to fight it? He said, no, he needs 2 or 3 people, but there's about 12 or 14 people in the country that can do it. I said, employ them. And he'd come back and say, sorry, they're working for Bombala, sorry, they've been employed on Bombala. And he said, there's one more person that he can contact. And he phoned him and he said, Chris, let's have a beer. And I said, no, I'll just walk down. He says, what do you mean I walk down? He says, I work upstairs with Bombala. So we had the claim. I will spend the rest of my natural life in court with litigation. So that's a thing that you know. So I think that maybe just to say what are the lessons that I've learned in terms of leadership. The first thing is the selection of the team. Up to 94, I thought if you want to have a good meeting, you have 5 engineers. If you want to have a great meeting, you have 10 engineers. If you have to have a brilliant meeting, you need 20 engineers. Man, now I've discovered if I have 20 engineers, I'm wasting 18 of theirs time. I need an engineer, I need a social science, I need all the soft issues, environmentalists. So the team selection is critical. The next thing is that, and this is maybe a difficult thing to say, the better your team. A good leader surrounds himself with strong people. If he surrounds himself with weak people, they will just say yes. And in the end, they might as well not come to the meeting. You can send your secretary, and you just give a card that says yes. And then somebody asks a question, so you have to put a team together that are strong. The team dynamics, everyone is an expert. I walk in there and I know less about the financial model, about the environmental impact than anybody sitting around like that. I must be able, or the leader must be able, to give everyone a voice, give everyone an opportunity to state their case. But in the end, he or she must make a decision. You have to make a decision and stand by it. And that decision, especially if you can't call a friend, is based on the gut feeling. You have to say, does it sound right? And then do it. You have to manage the risks. It's a greenfields project. The process, and it's quite interesting, the process, there's a sequential process where you start with the authorization, developing the tender documents, going through the negotiation, signing the financial closing. But running parallel to that is the question of litigation. And remember, if you get litigated against, either take you to court on content or process. So you have to be very clear on content or process. You have to look at authorization, and you have to look at communication. How do you keep on communicating? I think Gautrain was quite well in that, and maybe let me just talk about communication. You have to have a single point of focus in communication. We took a decision, any technical question would come to me, any political question will go to Job of Wiki, will go to the chairman of the political committee. We would build a relationship with the media. You're not allowed to lie to them. I never told them the full story, but you're not allowed to lie to them, and you have to build up a credibility, which means they could phone you in the middle of the night and say there's a problem, what do you say about it? We went to Derby to drive on the first train. Chalawa was busy driving the train up and down the test track. And I got a call that said there's a sinkhole. There's a hole in Rosebank, the tunnels came in. So I said to the Premier, we have half the newspapers in South Africa here, but the other half, which is still in Joburg, they're writing about this tunnel that's came in. So it has to be finished. Then just about a reward system. If you're a leader in a project like this, your reward has to be internal. You have to say to yourself, if I achieve this, I will have just the reward. Because if you're looking for reward outside yourself, you bet. Because there are millions of people that want to kill you, that want to kill your project. So you will never get the justification outside. It has to be internal. And reward for your staff, you have to allow them growth. You have to allow them a place in the sun. So it's not to do around just money. Money is an issue, but not that. You have to have a value system. Now, in the olden days, religion, what is nice about the Bible doesn't say, man, if it's like Freddie Mercury, I want it all and I want it now. The Bible said this is right and this is wrong. It doesn't say if and but. And that gave you a value system. You have to have a value system on which you work. There has to be a line that you will not cross. And I think in South Africa, a lot of the projects have gone very bad because people have got a line which they keep on moving. What is nice about our project is that the Auditor General, when they have an office in my building, they take about 6 months a year to audit every transaction that we make. And our audit report is 2 pages. One page that says, thank you for the cooperation, they work well with us, and the next page that says, nothing is wrong with our financial statements, nothing is wrong with our predetermined objectives, nothing is wrong with the rules and regulations. Clean audit, 100% clean audit. We've had it now since the project incepted, so that works well. And that's about it.
Thank you very much.
I really think that's a rich story, and thank you for sharing that with us. I wonder, I think we still have some time, but I wonder if I can allow maybe 2 or 3 questions. Anything you want to ask on reflection?
Yes.
Jackie, if I might ask you, what's the biggest mistake that you've made that you've learned the most from?
Biggest mistake, and I think that if you build infrastructure, you must build the basic system, what you need. You can cut on other corners. We didn't have enough money. Maybe in terms of the TA, the Treasury authorization, we have to prove feasibility, which is value for money, affordability, and risk transfer. And affordability, they give you a limit. When we got the BAFO in, we worked within the limit. So what we did is I cut the platform at the airport. You can only take two carriages, and I took out one tunnel from. There's only a single tunnel running from Sandton. I now at a great cost have to fix that, and at a great cost I have to now build that other one. So I think that was the fundamental difference. The other thing, maybe we had an EIA process. We had 6 open days where we had about 2,000-3,000 people coming to it. We have 14,000 interested and affected parties. We have the biggest EIA process in the history of the country. We had we identified interested and affected parties, and we had 140 meetings with them at night. And I was shouted at and screamed at 139. But we had a group in Machanek called the ML4, Machanek Lucas Rand Property Association. And there was a lot of academics that lived there from the University of Pretoria, and they just hated the project. They said they would stop us. So we had, of the 140 projects, 140 meetings, we had 49 meetings with the ML4, 49. And if I had my life again, I would have had 11. And just said, the difference between us is so big. Let's go to court. They went to court. Man, we changed the project. In the end, they weren't affected one house. They said, we'll see you in court. We went to court. They lost. There was 3 judges on the bench. They were told to pay my cost, which is about $2 million. They then said, we're a non-profit organization. I can take their office and the one chair. So they haven't paid me yet. So in that. But the rest, and maybe, I don't know if there's any Frenchman here, but after working with a French for 15 years now, I worked out, how do you know when a Frenchman lies? It's when he opens his mouth, you see. So if I had my life over again, we may have given it to the others, but the French, I can just tell you, I was invited to go to the French embassy, and so I'm sitting next to the ambassador. Between the ambassador and me, there's a lady, and she got the Order of France for something that she did. So the ambassador's talking to her the whole time. You can't scream over. So I had my dinner, and I said to the ambassador, cheers, I'm going. So he gets up and he says to me, sorry, he didn't talk to me, but he had this lady. So I said, no problem. So he says to me, how's it going with the project? I say, man, it's all right, but boy, they're difficult. He says, boy, they're crocodiles. So, I mean, this is the ambassador of France. He says this about maybe one thing that I'd like to say that I haven't spoken about. The project has got a legal way of running. It's got concession agreement and so on. But then there is a lot of political stuff happening behind the scenes where they are trying to influence the politicians. My best story is that they went to see Jeremy Cronin. I have to tell you. They went to see Jeremy Cronin and they said, he must get rid of me because I don't like soccer and I only talk about rugby. So Jeremy Cronin says, man, if this is the reason why Jack van der Merwe must leave this project, then... So they turn to each other, the two French diplomats, and they start talking French to each other. And they say, you know, we're wasting our time, this politician's going to do nothing. But Jeremy Cronin studied at the Sorbonne in Paris, and he just answered them back in French and said, don't talk to me like that. So, but then, maybe just around the soccer, the project was announced in 2000. We started working, and the project was going on well. In 2004, we were awarded the soccer award. I got a letter, a personal letter from Trevor Manuel saying to me, if I ever couple the train to the soccer, he would fire me personally. So I said, fine, I won't say a word. The next day, the Premier says, we're going to be ready for the soccer. So all of a sudden, in this negotiation with the French, they are now dragging the feet. Because remember, we have these three classes of disputes, and if it's a class 3 one, we can't go ahead because we have to negotiate that. And all they did, they just dragged those class 3 disputes. And we were running out of time. In the end, we had to break the project into 2. Say, let's open just the airport to Sandton Link. And then it was even later, and then we started moving all the services before we even signed the contract. In the end, we started working on the project before we signed financial close with the banks. But so in the end, I had to build a train. We finished the project on the 8th of June 2010. And the soccer started on the 11th of June. So we were 3 days in time for the soccer.
Wow.
Well done.
Beautiful. Another comment? Yes.
What were the challenges in terms of skills? I learned that wellness was important from someone.
Yeah, let me tell you about skills, because when you were talking, the thing that bugs me the most, I'm Director General of Transport. I spend 5 billion rand a year. Not one university, not one engineering university comes to me and says, what type of animal would you like to get out of the university? I'm amazed. I mean, who do they generate engineers for? So there's this junction between what is being produced in the universities versus what is needed. Now, so that's the first part of the skill. The second part is that in Kucha, when they did the Kucha Harbour, they said they wanted welders with 10 years experience. They looked around and they said there's no welders in South Africa with 10 years experience. The next day, 50, 60, 70 welders from Croatia rocked up there. And they welded for 6 months and then they left. So there was no skills transfer, there was nothing. So we decided, and maybe this is an important thing, we decided in the case of a PPP, it's always technical, financial and legal. We said we'll do the fourth one, which is associate non-technical. So we took Soobramoney, you remember it took a year to develop what is empowerment, what is transformation. He came to the conclusion it's complicated. But then he said, and it is complicated. You know, I mean, I've been a construction guy for all my life. We used to have these requirements, and the contractor would put the requirement into the tender. The people will sit under the tree, and he'll bring in plant and do it with big earthmoving equipment, and then just pay the penalty because it was cheaper. You would get more production, so you'd hire the people to work by hand and just let them sit under the tree. So we said, in the case of us, we would have socioeconomic requirements. We said empowerment is directorship, ownership, senior management, job creation, procurement, subcontracting, skills development. So we had women in training, people with disabilities. So we had 22 items that we said we would want. And then Java Mleketi was very clear. At that stage, the government was going towards quotas, saying must be this, must be that. Java said no, let's put it in square brackets and say this is what we'd like, but we will use it in the evaluation of the tender, and if it's better, you will then get the advantage. So we got double the numbers that we thought that we would. Then we appointed a socioeconomic monitor, And they followed the money, because remember, you have a guy that tenders with a briefcase, he gets the tender, but then Basil Reed does the job. So this socioeconomic monitor, they were 3 months behind. They used to follow the money right into the bank account. And if it was a fronting, they would. Now the penalties that I had was 70 million rand every quarter, and there was 12 termination points, and if they had 12, they would be terminated. So what did Bombala do? They were scared. They actually, and it's one of the success stories of the project, they overperformed by 300-400%. Some, we said so many to SMMEs, so much money to women with people with disability. Everything has been 3, 4, 5, 6 times oversubscribed. So we said in the skills, I said we needed train operators. But you can't train a crane operator, because these cranes at the construction site are always busy. So I bought 3, I put them at Waterfontein, and we trained the people as crane operators. Put them in 2 months course, gave them a certificate, and then brought them back to you. So when they said to me they needed welders, I said, man, if you need 10 years, I'll give you 2 welders with 5 years experience. You see that you train. So, and it worked very well. We asked to present papers at the Highway Administration, Federal Highway Administration in America, about how do you do this because all the PPPs have got a form of this saying you must use local labor, you must use local materials or stuff like that. So I think the case study there is quite good.
Lastly, is your case study available online?
And one day when I have time, can I, for some reason, I always run 2 jobs. I was sitting in my office, minding my own business, but I got a fax from the president saying, I've been appointed as the Chief Investigating Officer for Sarafina. Those of you that will remember, in 1995, 6, 7, I spent half my life traveling all over South Africa trying to build a case in Sarafina. Then I get appointed with a Premier, so in 2004, the Premier, I sat down with Shalowa and I said, fine, I'll run the department and the train. He said, no, the train's going to be too important. You don't have enough time, you must just do the train. So I said, do I have a choice? He said, no. So I moved to Paul Mashatile, and then a month later I got a call and he said, I want to see you in the shared service center. So I walked in there and the guy said to me, who are you? I said, I'm from Merwe. What are you doing here? I said, man, I don't know. I was told to be here. So Paul Mashatile walks in and says to the HOD, you fight? Jack from Merwe, you there in the department. So I said, man, what about time? He says, oh no, man, you know the story, a month. I spent 14 months running the shared service center. Then the Premier said to me, he needs a 25-year plan for transport, which I've done now because I don't have enough to keep me busy now. I'm doing the electronics. So when that's finished, I'll write that song.
I would love to have another session with Mr. Van der Merwe on the Electropolis, because I think that would be interesting to hear what is your views on that, because I think many of us wonder what is this Electropolis, but I'm not going to say much about it except you want to say a short perspective on it. Electropolis, what the hell is that?
If one looks at life, the first guy who had a chicken to sell, to barter with, he sat in front of the road coming past his house and said the chicken, but then he came to this discovery. He sat in the crossroads, he had double the amount of traffic that he could barter with. So the first point of trade was at crossroads. Then the next point of trade was at harbours, and now in the modern world, the point of trade is at the airport, because now your trading partner is just a flight away. So you can produce something here and trade it with Hong Kong or with Germany. And so we're developing around the airport, looking at ICT, looking at freight logistics, looking at training and development. Can I just say, yes, I made myself popular with Only Ngubele, the mayor of Ekurhuleni. I said, I don't want another university. I don't want a university at the airport. I want trade. I want to get guys doing apprenticeships. And if we're doing it, I'll take it to the townships and have a place where we can do the training there and the people can walk in. So what we're doing with that, I actually came this morning. I was at the DG presenting our 5-year plan. We want to create 246,000 jobs, 250,000 jobs. And so I will, now that I know who the new Minister of Finance is, I'm training how to go on my knees. I'm going to look for money and make it a SIP project. Because at the moment it's part of SIP 2. Make it a full SIP project. So it's really taking good learning and doing business with the
So we're looking forward to that, and hopefully at some time we can get more details. I want to say thank you very much, Mr. Van der Merwe. In some way, I have this need almost to say in my view, you're a real son of South Africa.
Yeah.
And thanks for what you've created with your team and a lot of people around the world, but that you've created it in such a way you've done it, and the humble way you present it. And it's always great for us to hear how you've done it, and I hope we take more lessons. And we are working on getting the case study. So thank you very much for that.
Maybe I'll just say what PPPs were developed in England. They call PFIs, Public Financial Institute. So they have prizes every year. So I got an email saying Gautrain's been nominated. We have to go to London. So my lawyer, Mitchell Ledwaba, I said to him, "Do you have a tuxedo? Let's go." So we go to the Dorchester Hotel. 1,500 guys with tuxedos on, and we're there for the PPP awards. And they say, "Who are you?" Van der Merwe, "Where do you come from?" "And what are you here for?" "The Gautrain." You just have to make up the number. So we're sitting in this table, and they have this prize and this prize and that prize. And in the end, they have a TV presenter giving out the prizes. And in the end, the biggest prize of the night is the best PPP deal to sign in the world. And we're sitting there, and Gautrain comes across the and Mitch just sits down and he starts crying, and I say, "Get up, let's go and get our prizes." I mean, and then they knew what Gautrain is and where Gautrain is. So,
Great.
Well, I want to say thank you for taking South Africa to the world. I believe you'll have the opportunity, and Stormy's around if you want to have a photograph. Mr. Van der Merwe is usually a shy guy, but thank you for being here. I do want to end off today. Aidan is with us, and you remember him, he works with us in terms of this facilitation process. But Aidan, just for the PhD colleagues around the table, is anticipating joining the journey, Sophie, of becoming a PhD. But I thought we'll raise the bar a bit, Jay. So I just want to give a short minute or two to Aidan. He just wants to position his intention to do a PhD by sharing with us some of the work that he's going to publish in anticipation of doing his PhD. Just a comment, in anticipation of his PhD. Aidan?
Thanks, Vinny. It's a very dangerous thing because with Jay, what happened, his PhD then got blown open. So I'm willing to accept any comments or guidance. But really, I think just to sum it up, and Benny's mentioned the work that I'm about to publish, and it really is contained in two works. One is a business management hand guide, but it's a satire that makes a case for something that I think people will find controversial, and that is a case for dehumanization. Because what I'm finding in the work that I do, and that is around the stories that people have to tell about their experiences of work and where they find their worth. And I've been really interested in the links between the two presentations today. So about when we mentioned the topic of employability, what is it that people have to be and become to get that job? Where's that worth inherent in it? And then, Jack, also what you're saying about what you've learned about having the need to give people a voice around the table and to find their humanity. So it's a satirical business management hand guide that just, as an alternative takes a look and says, well, what are we doing to rehumanize our institutions, rehumanize our people, and what does it mean to be an employee, and how do we find that worth? And then the other one is linked to this topic of humanity in the workplace as well, but it's a business fable. I run an organization called the Narrative Lab, and we really believe in stories, and we've heard, if you haven't been counting, we've probably heard in excess of 60 anecdotes today. So anecdotes and stories are really important, and what I've done, and this is about, I think, positioning the PhD journey through a story, is tell the story of leaders and people who are being forced, because of all sorts of pressures in the environment, to re-author their own story, their own leadership journey, reflecting on their own stories. And then what does that mean when you have to take an organization with you? And then I think the last thing that then say, Ben, is just, one of the common kind of meta themes I hear in the stories that we gather, especially around leadership, is this challenge of how do I get the best or the most out of my people? mentioned the triple bottom line, that this people imperative, the people strategy imperative, themes of employee engagement, employee enthusiasm, and then I think also today the picture's been brought in my mind around skills, competence and capability. This is a core issue, I think, when it comes to the management of people, is how do we get the best or the most out of them? Do employees show up as an asset that is there to manage as a class of asset, or do people show up as people? And what does that mean when we allow their humanity to come into the workplace? So then maybe just a little bit of a punt, Benny.
Yes.
The two books as part of this kind of PhD journey are out there available. If you search for my name on Kindle and Amazon, they're out there. You can come and get a card from me for Narrative Lab. We have the books available. And really what we're hoping to do with them, and this is my hope, is to stimulate a controversial conversation around the role of people in our organization.
Storm will work with Aidan, and we will also put it on our web and make a link, because also for our people module on management of people, Jean, we hope to include that as a reference text. So thank you very much for the work that you've done in working with us, and Storm will make that available online. Thank you very much for everybody. Our contributors today, Jay, thank you very much. Good luck with your journey. And Jack, exceptionally thank you for sharing your story with us. Please join us for a drink and for something to eat outside. Thank you very much.